What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe, your host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. The four things at the front end: 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. This is the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, and we have a repeat, so to speak. This young gentleman was on about a week and a half ago, and there was bad audio on my end. And I don't like to give my audience, my community, bad audio. So I said, hey, IC Bailey, can you come back on and let's do it right? And he said,
always.
No problem. So we're going to do it right this time. Let me just tell you a little bit about IC Bailey. He is not a stranger anymore. He's definitely a friend of the Dr. Vibe show. In 2012, he found himself distraught over the effects that racism had upon his life. Reckoning with his childhood abuse at the hands of the cruel child welfare system, he spent his first 16 years under a torrent of racial, sexual, physical, and mental abuse. Looking for relief from this abuse, he began having conversations with white people around him, allowing him keen insight into the white people and their culture of whiteness. What he did not find were any significant work sharing the perspectives of white people about the blood they had spilled in the system they created. There were a few examples of common dialogue between the oppressor and the oppressed. Conversations with white people, Dialogues About Race, which is a book he has just released, is the culmination of that journey to see fruitful dialogues between Black and white people. It is truly a revolutionary work, and we're going to aim to have a revolutionary conversation. Mr. IC Bailey, how are things? What's going on?
Much is all good, as they say in the hood. I'm well.
I know you're well because before you came on live, you were listening to the Roots, so I know you're good.
That's it. Alexa, continue. Those Roots.
You're gonna do the Roots thing.
There we go.
There we go. The Roots are playing.
Pop bands of all time. Black Thought, the greatest freestyler of all time. Here he is.
Have you ever? Did you see the freestyle he did on Hot 97?
Oh my goodness! I play it at least on our social media channels. I play that at least once a month because if you don't know what hip hop is, and you only have one example to show someone,
that's hip hop.
That freestyle.
It's the real deal. It is so that track is so the real deal. It's just out of control. But we don't want to talk about the Roots all night. We could if we wanted to, but let's get it, so to speak. Can you give some background about yourself? Because it sounds like the first 16 years of your life were challenging. So can you get back into those first 16 years and share them with us?
Always going from the fun stuff into this gut check time back into the trauma. But that's reality for Black people in the world today because of white supremacy and racism. So what I experienced as a young person is that my mother had some issues, some problems. She needed some help. And the way that the Canadian government dealt with the situation is by taking her 3 children and separating them to the wind in the 70s. And so they removed us from her care. They threw one sister west, one sister east, and me further up north in an all-white town, the only Black boy there, or only Black person I knew of there at the time. And I was introduced to a series of mental, racial, sexual, physical, emotional, spiritual, academic abuses for a good 15, 16 years of my life. And that's on top of the abuses that Black people like you and I, Dr. Vibe, face every day. So that's something that I had to survive. Black boy, white town, my rules for survival. That's the next book, by the way. So that's what I experienced in my youth. Not hearing you, brother.
Why were you sent there?
Well, the Children's Aid Society, at that point in time, just on the other side of 60 Scoop, what they did to the Native or Indigenous community in North America and Canada is whenever they see any sort of issues whatsoever, rather than work with that family, rather than invest in making Black families stronger and more healthier, they thought it'd just be best just to grab us and remove us because the mindset was Black children and Black families cannot take care of themselves. We can't work through their issues. And so they grabbed us and separated us, threw us to the wind, and left us to these environments, unchecked, in the hands of serial abusers. Right? Well, my one sister claims that she was in a wonderful community that adored her and stuff like that, and so maybe there's some good news there. But there's lots of evidence that isn't really what happened. My other sister has issues too, and that's their story. We'll tell it at a different time. But for me, it was just a torrent of abuse. There wasn't a single person in my life when I was a young person that didn't abuse me. Let me say that again. There wasn't a single person in my life that didn't bring a blanket of abuse over my life. And sometimes it's just neglect and miscare, saying nothing while these teachers and principals and janitors and neighbors and whoever are saying the end. They said the word nigger so much, I thought it was my name. We've heard that before.
Wow.
Then the beatings, and then there's the erasure of our history. And, Black people are from jungles, I heard, and I'll never be anything more than a caretaker in a school, or I'll be digging ditches. It was complete and absolute erasure, character assassination, and negative imagery of my Black self and my heritage. That's what I experienced.
Before we go any further, just want to shout out to two wonderful individuals on the Get Vocal platform. We have Dre, who does great conversations on the Get Vocal platform, and we have Carlos Phoenix. If you want to know about live streaming, just turn and go to Carlos Phoenix. That's all I'm just gonna leave it at that. So that's what I'm gonna say. So how did you getting back to the conversation, how did you get through those early years, man?
Well, I didn't. I mean, I'm here, so I survived, but we're talking post-traumatic stress disorder, talking depression, we're talking low self-esteem, we're talking about personality issues that came up, and just a lot of sadness. And so did I get through those periods of time? Yes, but with my survival came attached to it a whole bunch of stuff, baggage, we would say. Right. And so there was a lot of pain I went through, but primarily I watched white people. I learned what to say around them, what not to say. I learned their mannerisms. I've learned the things that they say. I learned that when they said one thing about, truth and justice and equality for all, but then did a entirely other thing, that I had to figure out a way. I had to figure out the rules for my survival. And that's in the next book.
How did your mother manage?
My mother was an amazing woman, journalism graduate of the University of West Indies, writing for the Jamaica Gleaner. Couldn't deal with patriarchy there, so she thought she was going to come here and tell amazing stories. Like, this woman was a storyteller, and she still is, even though she's no longer with us. And she came here to set the world on fire because she had a voice and she wanted to share it. And so how people dealt with women, how people dealt with Black people, you combine them in the late 60s, you've got a culture up here in Canada and North America where we don't value Black women's lives. And that's the story. The story of my life is the story of a Black woman's life, Carmen Bailey, and how poorly she was treated and abused and raped and beaten and fed street drugs to make her life untenable. That's my story because it's my mother's story.
So you've given us some background on the first 16 years. Take us through the next chapter after the first 16 years.
Well, we have this, if you will, demarcation point. We have me running into a library in my first couple of weeks of high school, because you go to all these regional schools, and then all of a sudden you land in the regional high school, and guess what? All those same bullies that are in all these different schools are there. And so I went into the library, and I was a voracious reader because I had no friends. And I remember one day hiding my face, literally hiding my face behind a book, hiding in an aisle. And that book had an X on it. And I was thinking at the time, what kind of book has an X on it? What's this about? And then Malcolm X. What kind of person has the last name of an X? for an X for a last name. So I started looking through it. Plymouth Rock? We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us, right? And I'm just like, this is a paradigm shift. It's almost like Neo, the red pill or the blue pill. And we picked the black pill, right? I picked the black pill. And from there, I recognized that it wasn't business as usual. I recognized I was descended from a proud people that had advanced civilizations that had conquered medicine and architecture and literature and art centuries before Europe ever crawled out of whatever huts it was in. That's what I learned about me, about my people, about my ancestor. And I remember just every single day I just go in and read this book because I couldn't bring it home. My goodness. You see Malcolm X, my goodness. If I brought that in the home, it wouldn't have even made it to the home because I got beat up every day coming from school. So that's what happened for me. That awakening kickstarted something in me. And from the next 16 years, I went through treating women like garbage. I mean, I'd like to say that I'm this elevated person, but no, I treated women like garbage. I was a horrible father at one point in time in my life. I was involved in drugs and crime and all those other things. And then career became the most important focus in my life, and money and all those other things. And it wasn't until I started really, again, paying attention to my ancestors and not the white mass power culture that I realized that identity can be found in healthy communities.
So let me ask then, what impact did the autobiography of Malcolm X have back then, and what does it have still on your life today?
I'm going to be honest with you. I've been watching this thing called The Godfather of Harlem. And
yes. Very interesting series.
Adam Clayton Powell, the mafioso dudes, but shining Prince Malcolm. And I'm amazed that, you know, once or twice a year, I always still watch Malcolm X. I read the book. You know, he always stands in my mind as an example for me to live by. Even though Malcolm had his own issues, he was misogynistic, as MLK. You know, they all had their issues. They weren't perfect. But what he means for me is an example that I could be more than they said that I was ever going to be in a million years, that I had value. And then the value, most importantly, the value that I have is a service that I give to my community. And it took me a long time to get that. And so I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is my community, the people that the people that are suffering with me in this world, marginalized people of the world, right? Black brothers and sisters everywhere, but not just them, transgender youth all over the planet, the LGBTQIH+ community, the poor people all across the world who are suffering. But the story of Blackness is a story of marginalization globally. So if you tell that story, you can tell a lot of other stories.
Well said, my man. Well said. Well, let's get on to the main thing tonight. Conversations with white people, dialogues about race. How did that come about? Where did the journey start with this book?
Well, part of me coming to terms with who I was and all the things I was experiencing was dealing with the rhetoric from the world that, Ian, you see racism in everything. You go to a mall, a security guard follows around, you say it's racism. You're going someplace, the police pull you over, it's racism. You're in a workplace and people talk to you passive aggressively or using microaggressions, and it's racism. You think racism's everywhere. And I started thinking, well, yeah, it is. It is everywhere. But wait a second. Is there something wrong with me? I've read Chisholm and Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou and Martha P. Johnson and Webb Du Bois and Joy DeGruy and Dr. John Henrik Clarke and all these other amazing people in the lexicon of in the wide array of our beautiful and amazing academics, our thought leaders. And I knew intellectually that, yeah, there's a whole history of centuries of oppression. But I never emotionally made that connect, that it wasn't really about the things that I was doing, but the things that have been done to us. And so what I tried to do is start having conversations. And I looked all around for a book that would show not just lived experience, but actual verbatim conversations that white and black people were having. And I'd see a little bit of it, but not a lot. So then I started having conversations. And so I started having conversations. But let me say this, is that most of the work in this book, a big chunk of the work that was done by black women. They were every single day doing the labor, going through the pain of racism, white supremacy, going through the pain of misogyny from black men, going through the pain of having to raise children, having being disrespected in the workplace, being disrespected in schools, being disrespected everywhere they went. But they still worked with me to do this work every single day. And so what we learned together was...
So let me ask, that brings up an interesting conversation piece. You had a lot of help from black women. Did you ask for help from black men, and why was the reason they weren't part of the helping team?
Well, look, I love my people. I love my brothers. You know, Dr. Vibe, I mean, you're tight. But I asked brothers to get involved, and some of them did. But colonialism of white supremacy and racism has done a number on our heads. So quite often, they didn't work well with black women. They wanted to speak over their voices. And I'm going to be honest with you, the civil rights movement, when we talk about Malcolm and Martin, but we don't talk about all the women who held up the civil rights movement, period. The civil rights movement, not every single luxury or every single right or privilege that we actually enjoy that was once taken away from us was given back to us by the hard work, blood, sweat, and tears and lifeblood of women, of black women. And so it's when we do this work, it's, can you get along and respect the sisters that are doing the labor and that always have been doing the labor? If you can't, then you can't do the work. And what happens is that there are a few brothers that can do this, but you know, there's a lot of black women that can do it because they have to do it every single day. They have to hold it down, and they have held it down, or we wouldn't be here.
I just want to just stay on that conversation piece for a moment. How did it make you feel when you saw some black men acting like that?
Well, it's frustrating for me because I'm sitting there and I'm watching. I'm like, brother, let allow the sister to share without feeling the need to step over her words. She's wise and smart. You're going to learn. Why not just support her, right? And you support, and she'll support you, and it'll be this through a synthesis of black beauty and excellence. And so it's frustrating to watch the disrespect because of the cultural insecurities that black men have. Now, so this is done by design. Racism as a system sends out negative imagery and negative behavior reinforcement to black men. So how often in the black community have we seen somebody talk and sound very articulate? Of course, we're articulate, but sound very articulate, and they say, no, that person, he sounds like he's white. So what we see...
Especially over a phone.
That's right, over the phone, right. Right, but we say that to each other. You know, oh, you sounding white, unless you live up to a stereotype that the mass media has pushed on you. And so black men taking this idea, oh, I'm not a victim. Yeah, we were victimized. Own that, get help with it. Admit where you're sad and you're lonely and you're tired and you're stressed out and you're frustrated. Get some help, get stronger together as a result of that. And we can do more in our communities. And that's where we're at, because racism and white supremacy want to tell us lies, right? It wants us to deflect and not take ownership for the pain that we're feeling. And as a result, we become of little use at times in our struggle, and very little use in interacting with black women.
It's interesting. I was going to mention something before the conversation ended, but I'm going to mention it already because on the Facebook end, I want to shout out to Natalie Crew and also to Sandy, but especially Natalie Crew is mentioning here. She goes, I can see The Wretch of the Earth by Fanon on the shelf.
That's right.
Yes. I was going to ask you about that, but Natalie Crew has a keen eye, so I knew she'd probably pick that up. Yeah, that is an outstanding piece of literature also.
Absolutely. And it's raw, and he doesn't, here's an intellectual that knew how to write raw about the struggles of his people and the rancidness of colonialism, right? It was very, very clear about what it does and the mindset that it shapes what it does with people and what its intent is as a system.
Nice.
There's some other stuff there. This new Jim Crow, since we're talking about books, by Michelle Alexander. Again, this is an amazing piece of literature, right? Like you can see, this is my second copy because I just keep on. It's just amazing as a reference material and as a straight read. Just
to highlight, was reading something always part of your core? Were you always a reader?
Well, I didn't have any friends, so it used to be Superman, Batman, and all that stuff. And that's why sometimes I do a lot of analysis on this stuff, because I still watch it today, but with a critical eye. So I can watch lasers, pow, pow, go off and stuff like that, but still be able to basically say stuff like the Avengers is white supremacy themes trying to push forward. They couldn't even, the number one selling movie in that same year that the last Avengers came out, or the second best-selling movie in that span of years, was Black Panther, and they kill him off so that he can come back and just stand there and shake his head. And then where they have the big battle is in Wakanda, because they love the spectacle of Black Death. But I digress. That's a conversation for another day.
That's another conversation day. Absolutely. So tell me, you decided you wanted to write this book. What were your first steps on getting the interviews? Because it's not something that every white person wants to talk about, especially in these times.
White people aren't going to talk to me, right? Unless I know them, and then they're just going to, but they wouldn't talk to me. So I'm 6'3", brother with dreads. So I'm going to come up to them and say, hey, can you talk to me about racism a little bit? Right? They're already... There's always these internal biases, so they're not going to be real. They're definitely not going to say some of the stuff that they really think, because they think I'm an angry Black man. And they're right, I am an angry Black man, and 400 years of persecution and injustice will do that to you. So what I did is I decided, well, let's do this over social media. Then that'll allow our team, as we grew, because it was just me in the beginning, of over 150 mods, Black people all over the place, to moderate these conversations. And so people in their homes, it's almost like when you're a kid and someone, they don't say anything when you're close to them, and then when you're on the other side of the schoolyard, they start calling you a bunch of names because they know they're far away. And it's the same thing here. So there's some things that people say in the comfort of their homes that they would never, ever say in person. And that's when you got the truth. And then people come in using profiles in social media like Facebook, Racebook, right? And they're able to say things and have no accountability. And that's the true thought. It's unfair that this is what they really think about Black people. We did this before Trump was coming in office. We watched it grow. We watched the diatribe, the hatred, the disrespect and vitriol towards Black lives grow, till it reaches a crescendo that's still going higher and higher and higher, I think. So we did this on social media.
What percent? Well, so did you do these interviews or conversations via social media, or did you just monitor conversations?
No, we engage the conversations. So in these environments, we set the narrative. So this is a Black space managed by primarily Black women, in which I act of service to them so that they can be respecting these communications. We control it. We mute, block, remove folks, and they run the show. So it's Annalisa, Fatima, or Oro, Janice, and the list, Kylie, and the list goes on and on and on. And so just echoing what Black women have been saying for like the last 400 years. They set the tone, they set the narrative, and they put white people on the hot spot about their behaviors for the last 400 years, asking questions like, are all white people racist? Asking questions like, do you know how racism has damaged the lives of Black people? And then when they wanted to circle back around and do this whataboutism, because when you want to talk about racism or white supremacy or poor behavior, quite often what they do is they want to put it back on Black people. And we said, no, That's not the space for this. If you don't like it, you can leave. We're talking about your behaviors, your actions, and you need to take ownership of it. And some people aren't comfortable with it. They view assertive challenge as hate.
So when you challenged individuals with that, what percentage of those respondents gave you pushback initially?
Well, pushback comes in different ways because you have, the overt racists are really easy because they don't spend a lot of time. They say, oh, yeah, you people, you people, right? It says you people, and then they disappear. Or they'll talk about how we were in jungles. They'll talk about misinformation, that we were uncivilized people and we needed them. They'll talk about slavery was a long time. They'll make up the myth, the lie about Irish people had it worse and that they were slaves, which is a complete myth. So there's a whole range of behaviors from what the really, really overt racists do to the people the liberal folks who engage in a form of racism that's probably the worst. Forget about the overt people. KKK folks, we know who they are. But this is really interesting. When we read Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail, you can see he wasn't concerned about the overt racists at all. He was concerned about the racism of liberal white people claim that they're working with black people, but stand in our ways. Well, I don't agree with the name of this. And I just, the language is a little bit harsh here today. And if you could just tone it down, maybe I could listen to you a little bit more. And that type of slow assassination of our narrative for freedom is what we've experienced a lot.
When you encountered the white liberals who carry on like that, how did you respond to them?
Well, we're assertive with them. We let them know that their privilege and their entitlement is putting them in a space where their prime concern is centering themselves. And so what this is really about is them saying white supremacy is this thing that uses racism. And racism is a construct that was created in order to have power control because you want to be center in all things. And so that type of behavior, we just confront them on their centering. Like, you're going to listen to black voices now or you can leave. And there's a lot of people that say, listen, thousands and thousands of people, right? Our combined networks in the conversations with groups, because we have conversations with not just white people, but another group conversations with black people, with women, with men, with the indigenous community, with the LGBTQIA2+ community, with POC, about mental health, about sexual relationships, parents and caregivers. So the list goes on and on. And so, but the constant narrative is that voices have power and everybody's voice is respected. And sometimes we cut off white voices because they're so used to their voices being the only voice that is important. We give them time. Here, take time. Take a time out. We're going to mute you for a couple hours or a couple days so you can just listen to black voices and hear some things you haven't heard before.
Wow, that is good. How many people did you have? Like, how many people did you end up interviewing, and how long did the whole process take?
You have to understand, like, right as we're speaking right now, in this time that we do this interview, there'll be 5,000 to 10,000 words created across the platform in conversations. Wow. These are so even if I want, like when researchers go someplace and say, well, okay, we're going to interview a bunch of people right now. Here's your flyer. No, it's not that. This is real conversations in which we do the work of hard conversations with people that we sometimes don't even want to talk to because we already know what they're going to say, and it's going to be damaging and abusive. So the reality is that these conversations, I couldn't stop them if I wanted to now. Sometimes when I take a couple of days off, what happens is I come back and there's like 100, 200, 300,000 words.
Yep.
And it just spins off. So these conversations are just going on. They're not interviews. They're diatribe. They're part of the fuel, the chorus of voices in our community today.
How long did it take to complete the project?
Well, it's not completed. So I'm not trying to be. It's not completed.
So how the stuff that is completed? How long did it take?
4 or 5 years, because at first
wow.
I wasn't sure. Like, like this version here is still, I'll never be satisfied. One of the issues here is I don't think we did the intersectionality of Black women well enough. I don't think we covered that in the conversations well enough, although the conversations that are still there, because this is just, the conversations are here. There may be 20, 25 conversations, but there might be, I'd say about 10 to 12,000 conversations altogether just sitting back there. We just chose the ones that we thought would highlight something. And so there was a couple manuscripts that went forward, but then I read them and I just said, no, that they don't represent some of the main issues. And we wanted to go back and have this conversation. What is racism again? Right? And we've got some amazing wisdom on how to address that. So
let me ask, in regards to doing the research behind this book, did you ever feel that you may have gone down the wrong path during the journey at all?
Oh yeah, I still do right now. There's this thing called Impostor Syndrome where I'm going to get off this interview with, I'm going to go like, what did I just do? Like, why am I bringing this up all the time? Because I mean, this stuff, I've been conditioned to believe I have no value. Right? So there's always that in my head. And it doesn't matter how many people tell me that, Ian, we love you, we're working together, we're doing some amazing stuff here. There's still always a part of me that is going to feel like, wow, what did I do? Did I waste my time? And part of it is because racism continues. I'm going to turn on the TV, CNN, and there's going to be some act of racism. I'm going to go to my news feed because I get constant news feed, and I'm going to see some racist act. I know in the next 7 days, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry for saying this, I'm not trying to traumatize anybody, but most likely a Black person will get shot and killed by the police someplace. So the reality is that we as Black people every single day are damaged and partially traumatized by the world that we live in. We're minimized and erased. That's the truth. And so, yeah, there's some days when doing this work is really difficult.
Mm-hmm. Conversations with white people. You have been conversing with them for many, 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 many years. Yeah. And especially in your younger days, have you seen any attitudes change from your younger days to what you're hearing from them now? Well,
let me tell you about the trends that I do see. They've become a lot better at structuring words. So they've learned what they've learned from the 60s civil rights movement is they can't say certain things without consequences. And so what they have done is this thing called code switching. So rather than say, y'all, now can I say that N-word on here? Because or is this a family show? Okay, all right. So rather than just say the N-word, because I say it, I don't police myself.
You already said it if you don't remember.
Yeah, I did. So rather than say y'all a bunch of niggers, what they do say is you people. They say you people. When they talk about being uppity in the old day, now they just say, you're so angry. When they talk about being made uncomfortable and then beating your face in, because that's what they used to do, or lynching us, or mutilating us, or raping us, or killing us, or selling us off, they now just say things like, why can't you just be about light, love, and unity, and the spiritual bypassing nonsense that they do? So there's different language, but the sentiment is the same. You don't matter to us. So I'll say that again. So while some of the actions have changed, right? There's not as many lynchings, public lynchings, although there's legal ones now, where there's not as many slurs used, there's code switching. And remember, while there's not as many Black people who are in chattel slavery, there's more Black people now who are enslaved in North America than there were ever slaves at any single period of time. Or something like that.
Can you expand on that? Because some people may not get what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but can you expand on that thought?
So in North America, both what the constitutions of the various governments in North Americans basically have said, you should check out this book, Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, or the movie 13 on Netflix. What they basically have said is slavery is illegal. We hear about Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. All right, Abraham, go Abraham. And the Emancipation Proclamation, 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States made slavery illegal. But there's a hitch in that. It says, unless in the case of imprisonment. So what they figured out is by putting some draconian rules, some extreme rules in, that what they figured out is that they'll move away from chattel slavery and they'll just put people in jail. And that's a form of slavery. That is slavery, right? And a lot of people don't know is that a lot of these institutions are prisons for profit. They're owned by private organizations where they rent out, not only do they make money from the government, but they also make money by renting out people to do labor for free, even cheaper than it would necessarily be to house a slave. So that's a form of slavery. It is slavery.
In your conversations with white people during the book, when you brought out these facts, what were white people's responses?
Well, they're not concerned with the facts because they know the base facts. They know. So when I say to them things like, privilege is real. Privilege doesn't mean that you haven't struggled. It just means that you struggled, but race wasn't one of the reasons why. And they don't really know what to say. Or they'll say that's not true. But then when you show them empirical data that says that the black household or the white household has 10 times the amount of wealth that a black community does, and it would take us 256 years to catch up to white community, then they start talking about work ethic. Well, I've worked hard for what you have. No, I have no doubt that you probably work hard, but everything you have wasn't obtained through your hard work. It was obtained because you have an infrastructure that allowed you a head start. An infrastructure paid for by black labor and black pain. So these things are indisputable, but they don't care.
Are they denying the truth, in your opinion?
Well, usually what happens is, so there's this thing called cognitive dissonance. And what happens with cognitive dissonance is the reality of your principles, truth, justice, and American way, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the reality, we treat black people like garbage. When it's brought up to their faces, there's this tension. And so everybody goes through cognitive dissonance, not for the same reasons, but they have choices what to do with it. So some people, what they do in order to deal with this tension, they try to change the truth. So that's not true. So that's okay. Black people are treated the same. Or they try to vilify black people. Oh, black on black crime. You're all shooting each other, so you're all deserving what you get. So then black people aren't deserving of having their human rights. So this cognitive dissonance plays with their minds, and it makes it difficult, and it slows their ability to be able to reason, to look at fact. They're not able to look at fact because they don't need to, because they've had 400 years of privilege entitlement.
Good stuff. Just want to shout out a definite person I support wherever and whenever I can. Whenever and wherever I can, Dr. Tachi, who hosts the livest live stream about media, tech, and pop culture. It's called Mediascope on Wednesday evenings at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on IG Live, and then 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Periscope Live and Facebook Live. And we're always happy to have Dr. Tachi in our presence. And Dr. Tachi, if you have any questions or comments, I will share them. Tout suite, we say en français. With this, so in this research, during this journey, was there anything that came up that you did not expect or surprised you during these conversations? Or was it just a reinforcement of what you believed and what you have experienced?
Yeah, I am completely and absolutely petrified at the enormity of this global system, which is threatening to destroy the very life of the planet, all life on the planet that we live on. Let me be clear about this. Environmental issues are the story of white supremacy, how the Industrial Revolution has made us focused on centering ourselves in our current needs more than life for the next 7 generations. And I could not believe how widespread. So when we would talk in Australia, when some of our team are out in Indigenous Rise and a group that we have there, and we heard about the colonialism there. We hear about it in Africa. We hear about Indigenous people all over the planet, in the South Americas. Wherever you go, there isn't a culture or society that hasn't been damaged by white supremacy. That's like, and it's the interconnected systems, how well it's run. That these are self-protecting, self-fulfilling systems that damage the lives of Black people. And there's this book called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yes.
He speaks about in this book, he speaks about how social change and trends and things like that happen. You know, there's a period of time where a bunch of things happen and nothing big really changes. And then it reaches a thing called a tipping point, and then the whole entire world changes, or paradigms change, or widespread change happens. The problem with this theory in white supremacy is an auto-correcting system that every time that tipping point is about to happen, it balances itself back again. So we never get that critical change in motion that you see in other things like the French Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, right?
Were there any points during the conversations that you said, you know what, I really can't go any further. I've heard enough and I just want to stop right here?
Yeah, every day. I don't want to do this anymore. There's duality of who we are. Every single day, who wants to open up their communication channels and see death threats and see the N-word said a bunch of times, right? Who wants to see Black people, we're tearing ourselves apart and infighting because of what racism does to us? It's very, very stressful, right? So there's many days when I just don't want to do this anymore. But the reality is, I am not my own. I am owned by my people. My people have brought me to this. You know, the reality is my mother had some issues, but they fought for her to try to get an abortion. But she said, and I'm not, this is her choice. I'm good with whatever choices she makes, right? It's up to her 100%. But my mother fought to keep me alive. And so with that, I have a debt to my mother, to her wonderful name, right? The C in IC Bailey is Carmen, right? So when you look at that, my mother's name will always be on a book, right? And if you haven't seen it, world know that, C. Bailey, right? You'll always see that on every book that I put together. And so there's some days I don't want to do this anymore. But you know what? Black women are amazing. They are amazing. If they don't hear from me for a couple of days, even sometimes if they have heard, Ian, are you okay? They reach out to me. The Lamoy Simmons, the Tennille Spencers, the Fatima Ayenis, Dr. Ayenis, the Dr. Annalisa Padillas, right? These are amazing people who I love. Kylie Brooks. There's this woman named Kylie Brooks, a Black sister who lives in Toronto. Every single day, all day, she's on there to do the work. She's amazing. And then, of course, my beloved, whose name I'm not going to mention, but she's here for me. And so those times they build me up, and we laugh together and joke. And
so, of course, we want people to buy the book. But what in your journey, what do white people think about Black people? And before you answer that, are you getting these conversations from all around the world, correct?
All around the world. Canada, US, South America, Australia, Europe, Asia, Russia, Scandinavia, wherever there's I don't know a country that I haven't heard someone speak from, a white person or a Black person. Although there's some Black people aren't even really in these countries, and they're not going to be open about the things they say because it could be dangerous for them.
Did you, again, I don't know how many people you interviewed in each, but were there some regions of the world that where you found out were less racist than others, or was it basically par for the course across the board?
It's almost like a candy store. There's sugar everywhere. There's sugar everywhere. It's just a different type of sugar in a different format and a different flavor. So while you may think that you look down south in Georgia or Alabama or Mississippi in the dirty, dirty South, you may see a brand of racism there. But then you go over to England and you see this form of veiled racism that's never spoke about. And then you come to Canada. Even in Canada, the racism is different. What's happening out west right now and the stuff, there's whole entire, that's the hate central of almost North America now. A lot of hate groups are moving out there because of big oil. And then you see what's happening in Montreal. We've seen what's happened in hockey. The racism in hockey is a throwback to some of the racism that we've seen in the 50s. People openly using the N-word or throwing banana peels on ice or yelling slurs at players' families or openly talking about vilifying immigrants like we've seen that Ingrid that got thrown off the sportscast, whose name I don't even want to mention. Okay. Right? So we see it in different varieties.
So Carlos Phoenix is saying, but there is racism in Africa.
Of course there's racism in Africa because there's a whole bunch of Afrikaners that actually have colonized Africa. So if you're talking about Black people reclaiming their own lands, then that's not racism. That's people reclaiming their own lands. You can't go into a country of people, treat them like garbage, butcher them, take over the land, and still hold 90% of resources in a country that's 95% Black. And when Black people start reclaiming those resources because they're starving and living in poverty, call that racism. And then there's this myth that white farmers are being killed in South Africa, which is totally not true. There's folks there who die at a smaller rate than the murder rate is anyplace else. So that's a myth. It's a complete, absolute myth. You would figure after apartheid, Black people would maybe go and seek vengeance on the white community. That hasn't happened. It hasn't. Right? And that may be bigotry, it may be prejudice, it may be discrimination, but it's not racism because we didn't create the construct. So let's get that straight.
Okay. So just to continue here, Dr. Tatsy says, I concur. I have never been cool with Europeans owning African resources. And then Carlos Phoenix is saying, I'm talking about Blacks against Blacks, but Dr. Tatsy says, Black on Black is not racism. That's colorism and classism.
Dr. Tatsy, thank you very much. And colorism is a byproduct of racism and white supremacy because what they've taught us, and we see it all the time with that football player that was talking about Black women and saying that they're bulldogs. We see these famous movie stars and athletes all the time denigrating the image of Black women because they've been taught through racism and white supremacy that what they see in the mirror is ugly. It's not beautiful. That's something that's a learned behavior. And so when they get older, they see white people as a vision of beauty. And then they treat Black women poorly or themselves poorly or other Black people. And I'm going to tell you, before we go any further, this thing about Black and Black crime is a myth because the number one, just so you know, the number one proponent or perpetrator of crime in Asian communities against Asian people are Asian people, white people and white people, Native people, and except for, let's be clear, the number one purveyor of violence against Native Indigenous people in the world is really white people. But that's what happens. So you have 2 million people of the same cultural ethnicity or race living together, they're going to commit crimes against each other because the world is segregated. So it's not a thing, it's a myth.
It's interesting. We're talking a little about Africa, and can't remember that I had a lady on a few weeks ago, and she very much studies African culture. And she said one of the things she shared on the platform was that how China is really aggressively taking over Africa, and to the point where when they are doing projects down there, they're not even using the labor force. They're having Chinese come in and work these projects. And actually, I was reading something in some Jamaica media the other day. Same thing's happening in Jamaica. You know, China's come in, invests in all this infrastructure, and China is bringing in Chinese people to work on that infrastructure. So right. That is
it's so same story. So you talk about that. In 1884, there's this thing called the Berlin Conference, and that's where all the world's leaders, with the exception of Africa, because they didn't value them, decided how they were going to divide up the continent of Africa. All those boundaries that you see, most of them, the vast majority, 99% of them, were drawn by these European powers. So that you have folks like King Leopold of Belgium, who came in, of Norway, sorry, the King Leopold of Norway came in and murdered 20 million Congolese. And so we're seeing China do the exact same thing as these other colonial powers, dividing up Africa. And then everybody wondering, well, what's wrong with Africa? Why is it not able to sustain itself? It's primarily because a big chunk of their tax dollars go out of the country. Many of these countries every year pay tithes in terms of taxes onto these European powers.
And Dr. Tachi can speak to this from experience of African heritage. And she's saying she blames the stupid African governments for allowing it. And she also says the Belgians were brutal.
Right, absolutely. And I would just say respectfully to Dr. Tachi, they didn't really have a choice. This is a system that's now global. Like you can't be a regional government and then have precious, semi-precious or semi-precious metals and stones there and not get outside influence. You cannot stop it unless there's a worldwide awakening of indigenous people. And we here in Canada and US and Australia and Africa, all over, we unite and start doing some stuff so that doesn't happen. But there's no choice. Like, what are African governments going to do at this point in time? There's not a lot that necessarily can be done because of the militarized power that these colonial powers have.
And I didn't get a chance, and I'll ask you now. What was the reason why you wrote this book? What was the why in this?
Well, I wanted to tell white people about their stuff. I wanted to say to them, look, that little black boy that you abused and beat and raped and told and wouldn't teach and would just ignore, he wrote a book about you, right? I wanted to do that. But then I want to feel connected to my people too as well. And so as a result of this, I've never been more connected to the Black community now and I've never been more connected to the Black community than right now as a result of this work, and have a full understanding of how amazing and valuable you are. Like for you, for example, Dr. Vibe, how just open and awesome you are. Hey, you want to come on my show? Talk about whatever you want to talk about. I'm here. I love you. I support your brother. That's the type of stuff. Folks like Louis March, Ita Satu at a different book list, Lemoy, who I mentioned, Neil, who I mentioned, Dr. Dory Tunsil, Professor Lillian Allen, one of my mentors. These are amazing people. You know, Rob Davis, Charmaine Williams, who's out there in Brampton holding it down. There's a whole force of people. Sister Greenland, I love you too as well. I mean, so these are all people who I've gotten to know and love as a result of this work.
Did you think that during the journey of writing this book, you actually changed some thought processes or thought patterns of people?
Well, I can watch it. So the beautiful thing is I can go back 4 years and look at where someone was when I'm not coming in here anymore. All you're practicing is hatred. And can't we all just get along? Dr. King said, can't we all just get along? No, he didn't say that. But this whole diatribe about how they're entitled to have Black people talk to them. And then 3 or 4 years later, they're talking about all white people are racist. We make mistakes every single day. What I need to do is own my own racism, my own poor behavior. I need to challenge it all the time. So I've seen that. But here's the thing. I'm not even focused on that. I just want this narrative to get out there. This is for us, by us, really. And if they benefit from it, wonderful. I wish them the benefit that it will bring to their community. I wish them the benefit of feeling more connected to their children and not having them to be mass shooters. More connected so that they're not totally lost in this morass of privilege. Privilege is an intoxicant.
Let me ask you, and it's good because we're having this is a totally different conversation we had than we had the first time, which is wonderful
Sure.
because there's more things we're expanding on. What do you feel the impact of social media has had on racism and white supremacy?
Well, so which side do you want, Dr. Black?
What? Hey, I'm just steering the ship. You drive the ship.
It's given white supremacists, because what we saw with the onset of the internet is a sharing of racist principles anywhere. So Dylan Roof, who walked in and shot a bunch of black grandmothers in a church after they prayed for them and shot them cold blank in their faces and killed them, wouldn't have necessarily happened in the same way 40 years ago, because he got radicalized through the internet. So what the internet does is find kids who have no meaning anymore in their lives, who feel they have no meaning because they give every single piece of privilege that you can imagine, and they don't have this meaning in their life. And so what they do is they take these disenfranchised kids who didn't get a skateboard, sorry, I shouldn't minimize it, who were going through pain and and suffering, and they'll take and they'll hone that, they'll switch it. So any of their problems in their life can be blamed on black people. That's the one side. The other side is we're strong. Like, I don't like the term, but you've heard Black Twitter. Black people are sharing in ways that we weren't able to share before. So when my friend Victor in Nigeria right now, who's one of our moderators and one of our team members, sees something going on there, he can share it. When Melinda or Sasaya, who are folks in Australia, one of our team members there, are saying Northern Territories, you got to see what's going on, and they got a cell phone and they're showing me the stuff. And Fatima in Atlanta, right? And then my native fams, Tear here in Ontario, and Naz, who's in San Diego, right? Or Oro's in San Diego, and Naz in Oakland. They can share their stories and we can compare. We can pool resources.
Interesting. How did you develop this team all around the world? How did that come about?
I didn't develop it. So these are fully functioning people that came to the table with their own life lived experience. So I didn't really develop anything. We just created
But I see. How did they find out about you? How did these parties and you start interacting?
We just started talking. And so when they talked, I said, how'd you like to join the team? And they joined the team. And so when you do that a couple hundred times, right? You do that a couple hundred times and you share, and they educated me and I educated them, and we're working together. We put some good processes together and we figure out a way to work to each other and guiding principles, then it works. And I have accountability circles. So I can't do whatever I want to do. I wish I could sometimes, but I have an accountability circle managed primarily by Council of Black and Native Women. Right? They tell me what's up sometimes. And so there's that environment where they're able to share. We've got children's books coming on, and we've got a nonprofit here in Ontario, and we funded folks to get medicine and toys at holiday times, and to fund folks moving from abusive situations. So this isn't just Facebook. This isn't kittens and bloopers. This is social activism. We are in all the places in the 363 days of the year that there's not a march. We're there 24/7, 7 days a week, 364 days a year. Always. Always.
Let me ask, how did you feel when you held the first finished copy of the book in your hands?
Can I tell a convenient lie? I was elated. I felt amazing. No, the truth was, is I had imposter syndrome. I didn't know. I didn't even really look at them. Like, I put them there. I looked at them for a second. I smiled, and then I put them down. Because part of me still doesn't feel, and this is what I have to own, this is what I go to therapy for, this is what I'm trying to deal with in my life, is part of me doesn't feel worthy of being able to do this. But now I just love it, right? I just love it. Sometimes I just pick them up and I just smell them and I hug them. But they're just things, right? What's of real value to me are the relationships that I have with people like you. And the doctor that I'm going to get to know is on the other end of the phone, and
Dr.
like
Tachi.
Donna and Tara and Kylie and just amazing people. Aaron DaCosta, even some members of the white community have been cool after they've been put in check a little, right? But I mean, it's the connections that are really valuable. It's the connections that are valuable to me. Lindsay, how you doing? Trista, how you doing? And my friend Farron Deeb, who, look, this brother, there's this gentleman by the name of Farron Deeb out of Chicago that's a principal. He's, he manages a lot of our business process. And he's a principal for a number of years. He just had a kidney transplant. But this brother's got the biggest heart and the most analytical mind that I've ever met. So to meet someone like him, I'm just amazed and honored that he's my friend. So that's the value. The book is cool. I'll write another book that doesn't have anything to do with conversations. Like, I'll always write stories now, but it's the people that I value.
Can you pick Can you pick a conversation on the book, or because I'm sure there's many that are impactful? Is there one you could pull out and share with our audience at all?
Yeah, there's this one in a section called Plain Straight Assholes. Well, actually, I'm going to pick one called The Boogeyman. And in the section called The Boogeyman, there's this one conversation called Beware the Racist Prime. And it's about this person who espouses some of the most hateful diatribes. Like, the folks that said the N-word, they didn't make it into the book because we all know they exist. But here's what this guy said. His name is Calder. And we changed the names to protect ourselves from not getting sued, because I don't care about that. So here's what he said. I.C. Bailey, you and your phony cronies, you're all a bunch of racist idiots consistently looking for reasons of racial judgment of whites and whoever else. I wonder how much of this can be contributed to the misconstrued and inaccurate fabrications of micro-light events, I don't even know what that means, that transpire around you in your daily life, all due to your exaggerated mindful obsession in exposing the world as being racist. Well, I.C. Bailey, for your information, we are in a racist world. Get over it. It's not going to change. And then he goes on to say, no other race complains or depicts such abuse or disrespect as Black people. Why don't you start to think in a positive manner and thank the good Lord for everything you have? You have endless opportunities with Black success stories of mass volume and blessings from every level of society. So, and he goes on to say some other things about how all we really want to do is to end the lives of white people all over the planet. But and I want you to understand that a lot of white people will look at that and say, that's not me. But part of Calder, I've seen in many, many white people across the board. And he's dangerous because what he would sit there and do is dine or ignore Black suffering. And it's not the slave master that I'm worried about, because only a small percentage of white people owned slaves, but a large percentage of white people contributed to the institution. And it's those who are contributing to the institution of racism that I'm concerned about, the Calder Parks of the world.
What has been the reaction to the book?
Well, I'm speaking primarily in an echo chamber. So we self-published, and we're working with a large publisher to try to do some really cool stuff. But the reaction is, the reaction to the conversations that is difficult. People don't want to hear this stuff. It's difficult. There's some train wrecks in these conversations. Like we've got people saying, well, all you want is our stuff, and we worked hard for it, and you're just lazy and all that stuff. And our response is, well, who works harder than a slave, right? So the reactions from liberal right people are being, well, we understand it's confirmation bias for them because they get to pretend that they're not racist. And the other people just don't want to hear it. It's almost like it's like, you know, across the vampire, they start burning up holy water, right? They're like, right, burn the book, right? So that's
what are your thoughts on reparations?
Well, they're not understood. So when we talk about reparations, I'm not a big fan of reparations. What I'm a fan of is restorations. And so what reparations is, the process of reparations, and I've had some really good mentors, Professor Gilbert Morris on this, who spent a lot of time on showing me what the difference between the two. So reparations basically says someone recognizes they did something wrong and they come to you on their own, or maybe with a little bit of plotting, and they say, here you go. What restorations do are a legal process that says, I'm going to go through a process to determine what you've taken from me, and we want you to restore it. So what that'll allow us to do is, rather than just get handouts, we can go back and say, okay, for example, I want, from legal discovery, all the paperwork from all these oil companies that are now sitting on black land, and I want to explore what that would look like today. And so what I want is, I want our restorations. I want our raw resources back universal, right? So it's restorations that I want, not reparations, right? And if we want to work to get something, wonderful, but I want it to go through restorations, and that's legal challenge. That's where we're in front of a trier of fact, and we're bringing evidence about the loss of what we had. So it's restorations I want.
Are you optimistic that we'll see some progress that in our lifetime on that subject?
No, everybody else will get restorations except for black people. There would be, like, first of all, I don't even know how they would give restorations other than just saying, okay, give me all your shit, right? Like literally saying, Belinda Gates, Bloomberg, Bezos, just handle all your stuff. We'll let you keep $10 million, right? There's not even enough money in the world to pay us restorations. So what is that we want? Well, then we want equity. And I'm not entirely sure how to get there, right? I know in pieces, and this is why my focus is a lot of times on local government, because I think if you focus on a lot of local governance, good, healthy community building local governance, then you're going to create pockets of excellence all throughout our world, and those are going to build stronger overall communities. And so my focus is that we can't change anything nationally. And I don't mean that to say that we can't change anything. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that Trump's not listening. So what we have to do is we go in our communities, build strong businesses, show up politically, make things difficult and uncomfortable for racist policy, and then we turn around and we see these regional changes being made, and those regional changes become something bigger.
In your opinion, are blacks ready for that?
Of course we are. I mean, ready for what? We're not school children that have to wait to be fed by white people. Of course we're ready for that. We created these advanced societies. The only reason why Europe's not in a dark, smoldering hole in the ground is because black people taught Europeans how not to sleep with their animals and not to drink water they poop in. So of course we're ready for that because we built North America, right? We built North America. So when I say built North America, because there were people here before, the infrastructure that you see today, we built, right? On top of the destroyed, erased, and genocide that happened to Native people, because they had an amazing self-sustaining culture for thousands and thousands of years here. So when I say built something, I'm talking about the cars and all the things that you see now that we enjoy are based, our whole economic system is built on the system of commodities and stocks and bonds. What are stocks and bonds? Stocks and bonds. First thing ever traded on Wall Street. So no, I'm not optimistic. I'm not at all. I'm not even remotely optimistic.
But in light of not being optimistic, what would you feel are some best strategies for blacks to combat racism that exists in the world today?
Well, we're still here. There's a whole entire groups of people who are no longer here. And so the first thing that we need to do is learn how to treat Black women better. Because the story of Black lives is the story of how well we treat Black women. Plain and simple. Because if we support and listen to and treat Black women better, we'll have healthier families and healthier cultures. And as a result, we'll make wiser decisions and we'll empower ourselves further. We'll facilitate better change, right? When I look back at places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, you know, Black Wall Street, we see that when Black people are left to their own devices, we do amazing things. Never mind the pyramids and all those things that they knocked, and the sphinxes that they knocked the nose off because they didn't want people to see the black nose of the sphinx. But beyond all that, we do amazing things when we're allowed to do amazing things. And so what we have to do is we have to keep on persevering in our communities. But primarily, I think the number one thing we do is we pay very close attention to how we're treating Black women in our culture. We cement Black business. We create platforms like this, or stay on platforms like this, and we keep the narrative talking. Because this is the first 50 years. This is the first 50 years, Dr. Vibe, in the history of this planet, in the history in the last 400 or 500 years, that we've been able to have this diatribe without being murdered or killed. So 400 years, 400 plus years in North America, this is one of the first periods, one of the first dispensations that we've been able to talk openly and say, screw white supremacy, that we haven't been murdered or killed. And it's still happening, but it's a unique period of time.
Any other suggestions on action steps?
No, the number one thing I'm going to tell you is that we just keep on talking to each other. Finance or economic controls. I'm going to tell people to start reading. One of the things is a colonized mind. One of the things a colonized mind needs to do is to ensure that it's fed by healthy paradigms of thought. We have to continue to be fed by positive paradigms of thought, so that we don't fall into counterintelligence that it's set up for us, so that we're not doing Kanye stuff. We're not doing Candace Owens stuff. We're not doing Ben Carson or Silk and Diamond stuff, right? That we're clear about that.
Okay. So as we wind down the conversation here, two last things I would ask. First of all, when it comes to conversations about race between Blacks and non-Blacks, what are your suggestions for those who are non-Black when they are speaking about racism to Blacks?
Well, I understand you're not the expert. You're not even close to it. That Black people are uniformly and completely and absolutely more qualified to talk about this in our lived experience than you are. And so you just need to sit back and listen. You want to talk about Black people, about race, do some labor. Go and research stuff. Go listen to Black voices. There's tons of stuff. You've got YouTube there. There's no excuses. Google's your friend. Here's how you use it. Google.com. Type what you want to learn in and press enter. 3 easy steps. So go do that stuff. Spend some time, and then maybe you can enter in an intelligent conversation. But disavow yourself of this notion that you know something about Black lived experience. When you do that, you'll be in a great position, because then you'll know that you don't know what you don't know.
And then what is your advice for Black people when they're addressing the subject of racism to white people?
You take care of yourself. This is about self-care. If you can't do it, don't talk to them about it, because you know that it takes a lot of energy and it can take away from some of the things you're doing. So brothers, sisters, fam, whatever genders, I just want you to feel confident in yourself. You just go and do the stuff that you need to do. Don't worry about having conversations. You just survive. Do what you need to survive on a daily basis, and take care of yourself. Find healthy ways to deal with this. Go talk to a professional. Do some exercise. Hang out with your spouses or your families. Watch some stuff on TV. Learn to meditate. Do whatever you need to do to find some healthy spaces, because this stuff will eat us alive.
Well, I'd like to say thank you for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule to share with us in regards to the book, your journey, etc. And you have an appearance coming up in Toronto.
Right. So I'm at a different book list on December the 5th, Thursday evening at 7 to 9 p.m. And that's at 779 Bathurst, Bloor and Bathurst, the famous A Different book list. You should be there. There's going to be panel discussion. Louis March is going to be there. Dr. Vibe, you said you probably show up.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have to tell you right now, I probably won't be there because I have a conversation that night with David Lewis Pert about Black masculinity.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. You can do it live from the show. So Dr. Dory Tunstall is there. Lemoy Simmons, the most amazing spoken word poet in the GTA, maybe in Canada, maybe in the world. The amazing entrepreneur Tennille Spencer from Deeply Dope Teas. My goodness, it's going to be an amazing evening. And some other leaders in the community are going to show up. And we're going to have a panel discussion. We're going to talk about racism. I'm going to read a little bit from the book. And some of the other folks will be there too as well.
Well, if people want to find out more about the book, where do they go?
Conversationswithwhitepeople.com. And you can see us on Amazon, our own website, Barnes & Noble, Ingram Sparks, iTunes, all that stuff. But
excellent. And for those, we're going to get more of IC before the end of the night. I've had conversations with him offline, as you can tell, and himself and LaRon Barton, who is a regular of the Dr. Vibe Show, are going to be on before the end of the month, and they're going to be panelists on a conversation about the state of Black men at the end of the decade. And it's interesting because one of the reasons I was going to mention the book by Frantz Fanon is LaRon is a huge fan of Frantz Fanon. So I said, you two already got something in common. I thought in my mind that you guys would make a good match. So it's verified now that it's going to be an epic conversation.
Wonderful. I look forward to it, Dr. Vibe. And as usual, I really just appreciate you being here and letting me go out with some roots in the background.
And I'm going to tell people, if you want to find out more about the Dr. Vibe Show, the best place to go to is thedrvibeshow.com. I'd like to thank Dr. Tachi, who stepped in for a bit. She's on for a lot of the conversation. Carlos Phoenix. I just want to check that who was on our Facebook page. Dr. Tachi would know this name. Natalie Crew was watching on the Facebook Live, and she probably still is on. I'd like to say thank you for making this an epic conversation. On the Periscope side, let me just check here. Had a few people on here. I can't read it all right now, but I'd like to say thank you for everyone who watched this live, listened to it live, who are going to watch it on the replay or listen to it on the replay. I'm Dr. Vibe. As always, I like to say, live your life as a dream if you can dream it. Sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger, block assumptions, and then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. And if you're watching this live on December 2nd, the next epic conversation is happening on Thursday evening. I can't be in two places at once. So Thursday evening, I'm going to be speaking with David Lewis Pert about Black masculinity. He's written a series of articles about Black masculinity in Huffington Post. So if I wasn't going to be at IC's thing, I'm going to be doing this. So can't be at both, but it's going to be an epic conversation. Buy IC's book. Buy his book. It is worth it.
Support
No matter what color you are, buy his book. So reach out to me, thedrvibeshow.com. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith and walk good. Good night, everybody.
All right.